So I want to talk to you guys really quick about some news that I saw, or a recent article that I saw. And it's about Activision Blizzard. As you guys probably know, they're one of the biggest video game companies in the world, probably one of the most innovative video game companies as well. I recently saw that they generate about 60%, 5.1 billion from microtransactions. 61% of the revenue comes from microtransactions, which is pretty crazy when you think about how the business model of video games has changed. Thomas, Jonas, I'm sure you guys used to play video games when you were growing up. Video game comes out, you beg your parents to take you to GameStop or take you to whatever, video game store. You buy the video game, it's $50. You pop it in, you play it, that's it. It's done. That you are a one-time customer for that company, right? And it's crazy how things have changed since then. Now kind of the business model that video games want and want to dive further into is kind of this recurring revenue model, where a customer is he's not just a customer every time they release a video game, but he's a recurring customer every time they release any type of digital item. And that's kind of the topic of this podcast. It's what sparked, the genesis of why I wanted to record this, where I wanted to talk about kind of these different payment methods and how, different industries can learn from the video game industry, and they already are. So yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. I'm joined again by Jonas Rubel and Thomas Euler. A little bit of a backwards intro there, but let me know, what do you guys think?
I think backwards intros are great, and I think the story about Activision Blizzard is also quite telling, quite interesting. And I mean, you see a lot of industries, they are changing, they are adopting to new business models. And I mean, if I would be a games publisher, I would also be very, very interested into getting either and or recurring revenues as well as these micropayments.
Did they specify where they put the threshold of what constitutes a micropayment and what is above a micropayment?
It's a good question. From what I saw, it's like things like skins, it's things like DLCs, it's things like it's mostly like skins and in-game purchases and those types of things. Subscription payments. So for example, right, World of Warcraft. That's a subscription payment. It's $15 a month, and you get access to be able to play World of Warcraft. That wouldn't count as a micropayment, from what I understand.
Yeah, these are subscription revenues.
Yeah.
I think you haven't look. I'm not an expert into the finances of games companies and how they structure it, but I think usually micropayments is what most of them would probably call in-app purchases. Yep. That is, or in-game purchases. That is what the industry lives on. And I think to me it's fascinating that Activision Blizzard has such a high percentage of this, because I mean, which companies did invent and scale these business models at first? It were the mobile gaming companies, and they still have a big foothold in that space. Mobile gaming, and also very early on, like the social Facebook gaming, like Zynga and Farmville and this generation. They introduced all these business models, and then I don't know, like roughly approximately 5 years ago, the big publishers all started to get into these business models, and now you have the EA Sports titles all having some component like this in their business model, and even I think some bigger games have gone even free to play, right?
I was just about to say Riot. So Riot Games, League of Legends specifically, one of the biggest video games ever, to be honest. I mean, the biggest MOBA, definitely. They were kind of the first one that really hit us all by surprise, where they were the first like major publisher to release a game that's fully free to pay and become as successful as they currently are. It's still completely free to play. Anyone can download and play League of Legends right now, and you don't have to spend a cent.
Yeah, and I guess they're moving in two directions, right? Either they're doing this free-to-play model, but then offer a bunch of in-app purchases or in-game purchases. The other being Microsoft venturing into the subscription business, basically Netflix for games with the Game Pass, where you basically get a flat rate on all. Basically, it's all Microsoft-owned games and a few ones where they acquired the licenses to add it to the package, right?
Yeah,
I know EA has the same. Yeah.
And I mean, so basically, all the big gaming platforms are trying to introduce some kind of subscription for games, and that also obviously it makes a lot of sense, because usually the way it works, of course, like the premiere titles, when they are brand new, the publishers would not put them into such a subscription bundle. But what you would do is, either if you have a small title and you want to get the reach of the platform, you can do it as a small publisher, or highlight titles you can put in there after a while, right? Once everybody has played it for 2, 3, 5, whatever years, and then you make it as part of this, and it's all additional incremental revenues for the publishers, and so they should also like it.
But one thing that I kind of fear, or you already kind of see happening, I mean, let's take Netflix, for example, right? So Netflix, I mean, maybe they are who we can thank for this like massive shift toward subscriptions. I fear that the quality starts to drop, which it definitely does. I mean, so Netflix has an incentive now and a compelling reason for them to push out as much content as they can, which is why they started doing, their own content, Netflix originals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because so people don't get sick of it and don't think, all right, well, the subscription is really not worth it anymore. Like, why am I still using only Netflix? And you're already seeing people start to jump over to Disney Plus, Hulu, and Amazon Prime.
But I feel like this is really a heavy user problem, because I've come across this quite a lot recently, also on Twitter and whatnot, where people start complaining about the decrease in quality. But if you're like me and you watch Netflix, I don't know, actively maybe once a week, then there's still plenty of like premium content on there. And only if you binge watch through one series a week, that's, I think, when that problem really starts to hit.
Yeah, who are those people? Losers.
But I think you're hinting at a good point that we could probably discuss in the context of subscription. So I think depending on the content type and the kind of media you're creating, it's more or less difficult to maintain and successfully scale subscriptions, because so there is, I guess you guys know, I'm a big fan of Stratechery / Ben Thompson, and he recently wrote in the context of the New York Times acquiring The Athletic about how I mean, if you followed The Athletic from the early days, they tried to onboard all these very good journalists in these local markets, because if you don't know US sports journalism super well, there it's traditionally really the local newspapers who cover their teams, and with the good writers. And now, of course, local newspapers in most markets had a hard time, but there were still these good writers, good journalists, and they got them and built it out. But then they scaled and got more and more writers in more and more markets. And early on, they really had the superstar, the best of the best writers. They managed to attract to The Athletic, but over time, the quality of the bundle and the content went down, and they, especially what The Athletic did, and I think to the detriment, is they really started focusing a lot on news and less on analysis. And here we get probably that's especially for written content, but maybe for all types of content. So if you want to create subscriptions, then I guess news is not what you should be doing and covering. It should much more be focused on analysis and something that is valuable to a certain number of people. So I started with quoting Ben, who wrote exactly about this phenomenon, this observation that the quality dropped in The Athletic, and himself is like the opposite end of the spectrum, right? He's like an individual creator doing super well with subscriptions. I would assume that most notable VCs, founders, and so on all subscribe to Stratechery, and he's not a one-man show completely, but at least he's a one-man creator with some help on the back end, and he is doing very well. And
I mean, the content has to truly be premium, I guess, to package what you're trying to say, right, Thomas? Like, in order, and I wonder if there's some like mystical buyer psychology at play here, where when a consumer is like, you know what, I'm going to give you my credit card, I'm going to purchase this subscription, I'm going to trust that you're going to give me content that's quality. I wonder if there's now an extra pressure on the creator if there's now an extra pressure where if I make a one-time transaction, or if I buy like something on Wish or something on AliExpress, something on Amazon, I purchase it, I get it. If the quality's not how I want it, I'll either return it or I'll say, fuck, it's not even worth my effort. I'm just going to keep it. But I wonder, once you give them that credit card and you get that subscription going, you now have like an attachment as a buyer, and you now have this different level of expectations.
Of course, now you've all of a sudden you've become a customer, and now you want to be treated like a customer.
Like a client
and in that
now.
case, and in that case, being treated as a client means good content, not just interesting. This caught my attention once, and now I'm gonna go find something else to read again.
But let me tell you, I'm two individual creator types that I'm a subscriber of are, for instance, of course, Ben, and also like a German basketball podcaster, journalist, Dre Vogt. And so I subscribe to these two guys, and sometimes for Ben, so there are weeks where I don't find the time to read his stuff, and then I try to catch up, and I don't always manage this. And sometimes there are week stretches where I don't read it. And to be frank, when it comes to Dre, I like listen to probably per year to 2 of the premium podcasts that I pay for with my donation subscription, call it as you like. So the reality is I cannot get myself to unsubscribe from him. It was super easy for me recently. I wanted to cancel another subscription. Then they had such a good stay on board offer that I took this, but I canceled 1 or 2 other subscriptions because I subscribe to so much stuff that I don't even find the time to use. That made a bit of economic sense for myself. But him, I thought about it. Should I unsubscribe? And I thought, no, I think it's important that he does what he does. And that is the advantage of individuals over big brands and big companies. You have this kind of emotional attachment. So I don't even know how many podcasts I get from him, and if he treats his clients well, because I don't care. I'm happy to support a good cause.
I mean, that's the Patreon model, right? In the end, you don't necessarily pay for getting all the content, and maybe the content is not even premium in the first place, but it's more like, this guy does a great thing, I'm a fan of his, I just want him to be able to keep doing what he's doing and what he likes.
What percentage of, if you had to maybe throw out a random guess, like what percentage of most of these creators' fan bases are these like loyalists? So you guys are describing as people that are like, I don't care if I don't consume a second of this person's content. Take my money. I love what you're doing. You're a beacon of light, of hope in this, otherwise shitty industry of writers or whatever industry it is. I wonder.
I guess it really depends on what type of creator that is. If it's like, for example, somebody that does something where you can have a high like emotional attachment. If you think, I don't know, I'm constructing an example here. I don't have somebody at hand, but if there would be somebody who's a journalist in war areas, for example, and you'd be a great fan of his work, then you would say, well, that's a really good cause. I support this guy. And probably there's a large percentage of the fan base that says, hey, just because it's important that we got people doing what this guy does, I'm going to pay for it. Whereas maybe sports, where there's an abundance of people writing in and around sports, you would have a much lower share of subscribers that support, no matter if they consume or not.
But even that depends. I mean, if Zach Lowe would leave ESPN and say, my podcast is now subscriber only, bam, I would take out my credit card. What do you want? And there would be, of course, there would be a limit. But if he would be asking $19.99 a month, I would pay it because he's in my life all the time. So I think you can look by media type on it. So for instance, podcast is an ideal medium where these people become kind of friends. They are in your ear, you hang out with them. And if you have had hours and hours and hours with them, and suddenly you can only listen to them behind a paywall, then I guess many, many people will be loyalists. And it also, I think, depends a bit on the subject matter. So if you as a creator own a niche that people are passionate about, then and this niche can be something from like super technical and businessy like Ben Thompson to something like Dungeons and Dragons
fishing.
or something like this, right? If you do really good stuff, then people will be, because they are passionate about the subject and they want to be connected to this, they will also be passionate about you, of course, if you are the creator. And then the way how you introduce these subscriptions or payment options in general might also depend, right? If you go the Patreon route where essentially you don't even charge, you say, hey, it would be great to support me, then more people will do it out of the want to support you. And if you do it in a different way, where like the typical analyst who sells analyst reports, then it will be more, okay, I want the content. And so there in between there is maybe an entire spectrum as well that you can look into.
But going back to the original question, to put like a number on it, I would assume, I mean, gut feeling, maybe 5 to 10% of the people, if
like your true fans, your tribe.
Yeah.
And that's why that's the reason I asked that, is because just for my next question or my next concern, I guess, for like the subscription model. And it's that, so let's say, Jonas, you're right. Let's say, just to be fair or to be generous, let's say it's 20%, higher end. The other 80% of fans are people who they're maybe a little more stingy with staying subscribed, A risk that I've seen and that I've seen a lot of people mention in some of these Patreon groups or some of these communities that I'm even a part of is that people will subscribe, download the entire backlog of content that the person has published, and that subscription has only costed them that 1 month, so $5 or whatever it is. They download everything for the past 6 months, unsubscribe, and then do it again 6 months later. And that's something that's just one example of some risk with subscriptions, right? So on top of the fact that there's, as Thomas likes to say, subscription fatigue, is on top of the fact that there's now a higher expectation on the creator to create premium content. Like Thomas, like you mentioned, you can't just create news. You can't just talk about current events. It's got to be like a nice hybrid of, it's got to be current enough where people need to listen to it right when it's released, but it needs to also be analysis enough where it's not just a piece of news that they can get from an RSS feed.
Yeah, so analysis or fun, right? You can do it with like the quality and the insight, or you can do it with the entertainment value that you provide. There are multiple ways that can make you successful. But yeah, you're definitely right with what you say.
Yeah, but Thomas, maybe you can touch on that idea of subscription fatigue a little more. I mean, we're pretty much talking about it already, but like,
sure.
Go ahead.
So I mean, I mentioned it on the last podcast, but the subscription fatigue, just like it implies, people get tired of subscribing to more services because they already subscribe to so many services, and that makes it harder to sell additional subscriptions. I mean, I'm one of the biggest fans of the subscription business model, just because recurring revenues are super, super sweet. However, again, if you cannot sell it, then it's not a great business model, and people have a lot of them. Like I said, I talked about my own subscription, not only fatigue, but also like how I have so many that I cannot even consume all the content I'm subscribing to. And that is the fundamental reality of human life, is that time is the only really scarce resource, and we have 24-hour days, all of us, and these can only get filled with so and so much content and stuff we consume. And I think, well, it's not directly related to the fatigue syndrome, but also to be considered when you, for yourself, consider should you go down the subscription route or not, then it is definitely also what does it mean. And this is what you perfectly articulated before, Ron. You also need to deliver. Whether or not people are 5 or 10% your fans, but many people who pay for your content will also want content. So you cannot say, hey, here's my cool subscription, but then I stop producing. So this creates some kind of additional pressure, and it doesn't even lend itself to every media format. So like there is probably almost no musician who could offer his or her own subscription, right? Because then you would have to drop, I don't know, how many songs would you have to drop every month to do this? And so music works as subscription only in a bundle if you have Spotify. And
I was going to say, you have probably at least you have to look at a label for this to do. Like a major label might be able to pull this off.
I don't think, I disagree slightly. I mean, yes, when it comes to music production, but not when it comes to music performance. Little idea. What if smaller bands looking to grow, they said, subscription, listen, you get the music right off the bat, but you also get like a live impromptu performance a digital performance that you can attend. You can maybe chat with us. We'll do our set, 50-minute set. You get access to that, and then we'll maybe answer some questions, like a digital VIP ticket or something.
Maybe you get to hang out when they do like a band, like how do you say, like practice? I bet for music there's a better word for it. But if you get to hang out, with these sessions, turn it on in the evening, and you get a few tunes, maybe not like perfectly mixed up, obviously,
jam
because
sessions.
it's live. Yeah, just jam sessions that you can tune in on a regular basis.
Yeah, most. So
why
there
not
are
attach
always
an
ways,
NFT?
Sure, there are always ways to make this work. No, but I wanted to get to NFTs right now because like in some media forms and content types, like quality is more important, and to certain artists and creators, quality is more important than quantity. And subscription, by definition, the very nature of the model is it's also about quantity. As we said before, ideally it's regular quality output, and that is maybe hard to achieve, and in some forms harder than in other forms. And long story short, I think some stuff lends itself more to a different paradigm, and here NFTs come into play as a really cool alternative option, because NFTs by definition are scarce, right? And that makes them an interesting alternative approach to monetizing content and stuff you create.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, as you mentioned, Thomas, time is the most scarce resource. And we've mentioned this in past podcasts, kind of the idea of like granting access, right? So typically when people think about subscriptions, especially in the creator economy, it's like you pay a subscription or a microtransaction, as we'll get back to shortly. But yeah, like what if you grant access with that subscription, or like we just mentioned with the jam session, like not only do you get all of our newest shit, you get all of our newest, songs and albums, but you also get access to us. I think I think that's like the next step in this creator economy journey, where people just want access to their favorite athletes or fans or musicians, and I think, as you mentioned, time is scarce, and how do you provide access in a scalable way? I don't know. Clones.
Yeah, clone. I mean, of course, like if you think about video chat is a way how you can, to a certain extent, scale access, but also, I mean, scaling
Twitch.
one-on-one personal access is different, and it's just not scalable to the same extent, which is also why access based model based on NFTs, so scarce digital objects, is very interesting for such a use case, right? Because they can achieve different prices, especially if the way how you distribute them is via auction, for instance, instead of a fixed price. And these are some of the models that are very interesting.
What was that podcast again you recommended? I remember it was on the way I drove home from Heidelberg here to Innsbruck last time, where you recommended, I think it was an A16Z podcast about this NFT and creator stuff, where they talked a lot about NFTs as like the special supporter club ticket or whatever.
Yeah.
That was definitely a good conversation about this.
Yeah, I guess I can find it and put it in the show notes here.
Yeah, I mean, there's another podcast, a couple guys from The Hustle. It's called My First Million. They experimented with NFTs, where they minted like an NFT and they auctioned it. And the owner of that NFT is going to get like a 5-minute or 10-minute segment and can appear on their podcast. And they do a podcast where they interview like VCs and like startups, and one of the most listened to like business podcasts. So I think that's like a super cool idea, where you're like manufacturing this digital asset out of thin air, and you're pumping so much value into it, where you can auction something like that, where all it costs them is 5 or 10 minutes of their time, for that person to be on the podcast. I think that, there's so much there, and we've talked about it in so many other,
Dude,
podcasts.
If I were to produce a movie, I would definitely look out for all the scenes where there's statists in the background, mint a ton of NFTs, sell those, and say, hey, if you want to be that statist in the background, you can get this one, and auction them off. Worst case, they sell for very little money, and I don't know, doesn't matter.
What do you mean
Best
status
case,
in the background? You mean like extras?
Extras, yeah, I guess.
Oh,
yeah, the
Yeah,
guys
extras in the movie.
Yeah, in German it's
Okay.
Statisten.
Okay.
Basically, the people that pretended.
Yeah, this would
going
be
along with
super.
Is that
everyday
really
business.
valuable though, Jonas? Like, hey,
Dude,
like
I bet
I was
for big
extra
movies,
number 33.
If you're
but if
extra
you're in
number
that movie,
33
like
in a
if you're
Tom
in the
Cruise
cinema,
production,
yeah, if you're in the cinema and then you can spot yourself in the background, I bet a few people would pay for that.
yeah. Most def. I think that is a very cool, especially for the right movie, not for every movie, but if it's like, I don't know, if Marvel would do it for the next Spider-Man, what do you think? Like, especially if you know which scene you would be in, then people, for a cool scene, people would pay a lot of money to be in
and
there.
I mean,
just
that's
to
what
be in
NFTs are great at. They don't need to be all the same. You can be like, for example, that guy selling ice cream that has like a very prominent scene because he sells an ice cone to Spider-Man himself. He might get a lot, and he doesn't need actor skills. He might get this one would sell for a lot more than the guy that, I don't know, just walking along the sideway.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes for a good talking point too, right? You're at a party, you walk up to a chick, and you're like, "Hey, did you see that elbow in that scene in the last Marvel movie? That was my elbow, baby." Like,
yeah,
I see it.
So no, that is definitely cool. But I wanted to probably bring us back to the point of your intro, Ron, where you talked about gaming and the staggering amount of micropayments that Activision Blizzard is getting. And so the question is, so we talked a lot about the subscription world and what this provides as in terms of upside, but which difficulties are also in there. So the question is, what are probably okay, sorry, I want to get us to the following point. Can we think a bit about together and talk about what makes a cool gaming environment for microtransactions versus subscriptions, and what can we learn about or from other creators? So Ron, I guess you're the most active gamer among us. Which are the gaming titles, and in which circumstances do microtransactions work super well?
Well, I know that Counter-Strike Go, it generates a ridiculous amount of revenue on skins. What do skins represent? I mean, let's just break down what a skin is. You're in a game, some 13-year-old German kid kills you, and then he stands over your body and he's got like an awesome skin on his AK-47, and you're like, damn, like it's social clout. It's peacocking. It's showing people I have this super rare digital asset, right? I mean, it's exactly what NFTs are. It's exactly what real physical art is. You have a rare painting in your house. You want to show it off. It's like social clout, and like to me, those are the things that people seem to be willing to spend a lot of money on. Where it's like, look at this awesome skin I have.
But then that translates into titles where I play an individual, and it's like a prominent individual where I can show that off. Whereas a title where I might control an entire army probably doesn't lend itself super well for this.
I don't know. I just know that people tend to want to spend money on things where they can stand out from the pack in some way. Or I mean, another example is like a game like Hearthstone, which is an Activision Blizzard. It's like a card RTS game. You can pay like $1 or €1, and then you get access to like a game mode, that otherwise you'd have to accrue a lot of coins to be able to play. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if people want to play this super fun game mode, they have to pay for it, or they play enough to accrue the coins for it. So it's kind of like this pay to play type of model, which I know that that gets a lot of backlash in the gaming community, but I think it'll receive less backlash and also work a lot better in the creator economy with like creators and influencers.
I think. Yeah, I think these are interesting examples that you mentioned, and when it comes to social clout and the willingness to pay for stuff that represents status in a community. I mean, we had this in the analog world for the longest of times. Now people spend on bigger cars because they want that their neighbors know, fuck, this guy is rich. And now to a new generation, cars don't matter the same anymore. Sorry, Jonas, you're probably not the best representative of this generation, but by and large, like, status will not go away as a social dynamic just because people spend more life in the digital realm. And that is something like we spend a lot of time now in digital communities, and there I guess it is very, very clearly something that creators, for instance, can create interesting sellable things around that are not only like a quick money grab, but that actually provide a lot of value to their community. And it's a good. I mean, it's not even an either or, right? I mean, if you can pull off a cool subscription, you can also do like cool NFTs that represent status in your community and give access to your time, for instance, or make you an extra in a movie. You can do both, but maybe if you think subscriptions are not for you, there are increasingly more alternatives to advertising, right? Because to a bunch of influencer type creators out there, advertising is the route to go. And I know I just recently talked to a very lovely person here in Heidelberg who has like 200K Instagram followers, and she told me how financially, of course, it's cool, but she also doesn't really like all the pressure that comes with talking with the advertisers and how they treat these people. I mean, it's not like if you are an independent creator, it's not like you can join a how do you call it, Ron? A Gewerkschaft.
Union.
Like a workers' council.
A union. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the trees rot, right?
Yeah, exactly. You cannot, right? So and many of these companies take advantage of you unless you're at the top of the pyramid, at which point they will not try to F with you. But long story short, people look for alternatives, but also not everybody wants to go into subscriptions. And if you look into NFTs, if you look into micropayments for individual stuff, that it didn't work because of credit cards before. But I mean, now thanks to tokens, I mean, let's just name drop our LT Fan Platform here, which can easily do it for you. But of course, there are different ways to get to the same goal. You can do it without the credit card transaction fees, and you can start monetizing individual content.
But Thomas, sorry, go ahead, Jonas.
No, I was just going to say, and I guess this is also a play that depends on the size and the amount of output that you have. I mean, people have dabbled around with the micropayments model, and I mean, one reason it didn't catch on was certainly due to credit card fees and all the overhead that comes with that. But second of all, also for the large media houses, it just works well to sell subscriptions. People are also lazy in canceling subscriptions. And for example, when you repeatedly find premium content, for me it was New York Times. Like for the longest time, I would come across New York Times premium articles that I couldn't read over and over again. And at some point, I was like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna get this subscription now for $5 a week. I think it's even $5 a month now. It's fairly cheap, and those media houses can certainly afford to say, well, either you get the subscription or you don't. But if you're like a small, I don't know, maybe a Washington Post, also way too big, but still sometimes I come across a premium article where I know, well, I'm not going to find another premium article I want to read within the next year probably, so I'm most definitely never going to get this subscription. Whereas if they would offer to buy this content for like $1, I would certainly do it, because right now I want to read this. Yeah. And so I guess size kind of determines if you might want to think beyond subscriptions and say, hey, maybe micropayments on a pay-per-piece basis are what I should try out.
I don't know. I think I'm not quite sure if it is like about size or about the degree of specialization and size. I think it's more like a function of this, because the New York Times is, so if you build a bundle, then you still need to be very good, right? It's not just about there are many articles, but you need a lot of articles. And then if you have this bundle offering where you will not go very often into a very specific niche because you cannot do it, then you need a lot more so that you as a subscriber will often enough find something that interests you. Whereas if you go down the route of hyper specialization, then your like total addressable market is much smaller. So you will not get the same kind of audience, but the willingness of pay, because you're so specialized into a certain area of interest, is probably much higher. So you don't need daily articles from this, but you would still be willing to pay because 5 times per month you get the best article or video or whatnot on that subject.
But I think there's, I think as kind of like some takeaway tips that I would like to extend. I mean, most creators, especially the bigger ones, they know about their audience. They know about the tendencies of their fans, or what types of content they want, what types of purchasing methods they're more privy on accepting. I think for the creators that are maybe smaller, that are still growing an audience, dude, simply just asking your audience, simply fielding these ideas to them, like, what types of content do you want to see? In what formats do you want it? Do you guys want one-off microtransactions? Do you want subscriptions? Like, I think that it can be as easy as that. And of course, knowing what type of content and not if you don't have this type of communication stream with your audience, and it's more of like a one-way street, that might be more difficult. You might have to test. But I think simply gauging their interest could be a good strategy.
Yeah, definitely.
Also playing around. I mean, the same model could be applied to, hey, do you want me to do product placements in my videos? Because if I don't do that, then at some point I do got to monetize this stuff in other ways. And so would you be down for a premium model where you pay a bit for my content, but therefore you don't get the product placements, all of that stuff? I guess a lot of creators would be in a position to get valuable feedback on that. Yeah. Chances are, though, if you reach out to your community about that, the core audience, the ones that are very likely to pay for you anyways, are the ones that might reply. So the feedback you might get might be a bit skewed towards the super fans already.
Yeah, I guess that is true. But it's also.
Did you get that run? It seemed like you were offline for a second.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So maybe we can, I don't know, cut this or not cut this. Let's see. So I guess what is definitely true is that if you ask your fans, this will be skewed towards certain types of fans, the more engaged ones answering. But that's also maybe not a problem, because the other ones you would never get to subscribe, get to pay anything anyways. So that is also, I mean, one thing to also point out here, to go in the spirit of Ron finding like a good summary and closing thought. I don't think premium content is for every type of creator and every type of media organization. And you can also see that everybody wants to do subscriptions, but if you are not the New York Times or somebody renowned for quality, it's much harder to do so. And if you're good at reach, and if you are good at being loud and speaking to everybody, then maybe an advertising-based model is for you. Or also the topic, right? I think if you are in a market like fashion, like beauty products, probably it's much better to aim for maximum reach, and you can do super lucrative advertising deals. That is also clear. But then, if you are doing a different type of content that is not geared towards creating reach, then definitely you at some point need to look into doing premium stuff, and this premium stuff does not only have to be a subscription. And I guess increasingly, I mean, you see all the big services are now starting to offer subscriptions. So should this make you feel like, oh, subscriptions are the new thing? I think no. This even makes the problem worse, because now everybody's going to ask for your subscription dollars, and the budget a person wants to spend on this is certainly limited.
Yeah, there's going to be a tipping point, right,
Yeah.
Thomas? As everyone starts to do subscriptions, Netflix is going to come around and be like, "No, we're doing this now," and then
And also, I mean,
that's going to be the new disruptor.
There's nothing stopping you from doing both, right? I mean, in the end, you can offer a subscription for the people that are that are the big fans of yours and tend to consume every piece that you put out there. But then there's this group that maybe has very limited time as a diverse interest set, and they just want to pick the 3 pieces where they make the time to actually read, listen to, watch, whatever you do.
Yeah, this $1, €1, and I just want to play this one game mode. I just want to hear this one podcast about this one topic. I think there's something there, and as Thomas, as you mentioned, the fungible tokens are a perfect tool for that, where you can let people pay a couple of tokens to unlock this piece of content. Non-fungible as well. NFTs would also work well, just I think in different ways, where like ownership of said NFT would grant access or something like that, instead of like a trade-in where here's the NFT, give me the content. But yeah, hey guys.
Absolutely. So
yeah, great podcast. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining me. If you guys are interested in the podcast, find us on Spotify. Give us a rating. Give us a good review. It helps grow the podcast.
5 stars.
5 stars if you can. If you got the time, give us a little review. It really helps us out. If you have any ideas for topics or any guests that you have in mind that you think would make for good participants, reach out to us.
Yourself.
Yeah, if you'd like to be a guest yourself, reach out. You'll find all of our socials and show notes and stuff like that in the show notes in the description. So yeah, thanks for joining me, guys.
Byron, take care.
My pleasure.